The Wi-Fi affair. I knocked on her door for internet and destroyed her marriage. I knocked on my neighbor's door at 5 p.m. asking for her Wi-Fi password. She opened the door in a bathrobe, looked me in the eyes, and said, "Come in. You won't want to go back to your place." What I didn't know? Her husband was a special forces soldier deployed in Afghanistan, and I was about to become the man who destroyed their marriage. Welcome to Ryan's Revelations, where we bring you true stories of love, betrayal, and forbidden relationships that destroyed everything. What you're about to hear is a real confession from a 25-year-old man who fell into an affair with his married neighbor. A woman whose husband was risking his life overseas while another man was sleeping in his bed. This is a story about loneliness, forbidden desire, and the devastating consequences when two people cross a line they can never uncross. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because we post new true betrayal stories 3 times a week. And if you've experienced something similar, drop your story in the comments. You might be featured in a future episode. Now, before we get into this story, let me warn you, this one is messy. There are no heroes here. Just 2 lonely people making terrible choices, and a soldier who came home to find his marriage destroyed. Are you ready? Let's dive in. This is the story of how a simple knock on a door for Wi-Fi turned into a 3-month affair that destroyed a 10-year marriage. It's about a war correspondent who felt invisible in her own marriage, a young man fresh off a breakup looking for connection, and a special forces soldier who came home early to find his wife in love with another man. By the end of this story, you'll hear about the bathrobe moment that started everything, 3 months of secret meetings and stolen nights, the dinner party where the husband thanked me for keeping his wife company, the explosive confrontation when the truth came out, and what happened when the affair had to survive in the real world. Stick around, because this story will make you question everything you think you know about love, loyalty, and whether the end justifies the means. Hey, my name's Theo. I'm 25 years old, and this is the story of how I became the other man in a married woman's life, all because I needed Wi-Fi. I just moved into a quiet apartment complex in Tacoma, Washington, fresh off a breakup with my ex Sarah. She'd walked out 3 months earlier, saying we wanted different things. Translation? She wanted someone with a 5-year plan, and I was still figuring out tomorrow. My new place was a work in progress. Boxes stacked in corners, a secondhand couch from Craigslist, no TV, just my laptop and running shoes by the door. I work remote IT support, troubleshooting software problems for people who don't know what a browser cache is. Not glamorous, but it pays the rent. I wasn't looking for much, just a steady routine, some peace. A fresh start that lasted exactly 1 week. It was a Friday afternoon when everything went sideways. I'd spent the day wrestling with a client's endless email issues, only to discover my apartment's internet wasn't working. The provider had botched the registration, leaving me with no Wi-Fi and a deadline looming. I tried hotspotting my phone, but the signal was garbage. My inbox was piling up with complaints. By 5 p.m., I was pacing, frustrated, my laptop mocking me from the table. I needed a fix. Fast. The building was quiet, just a few units on my floor. Mostly older folks or young couples. I'd barely met anyone since moving in, but I remembered the apartment next door. Number 204, I'd seen a woman come and go a few times, always alone. Always with a quick nod but no small talk. The other neighbors whispered about her, said she was hard to read, private, maybe even cold. Some kind of writer who kept to herself. I didn't care about any of that. I just needed Wi-Fi. I grabbed my phone, took a deep breath, and walked the 10 steps to her door. The hallway smelled faintly of laundry detergent. Her doormat was plain, no welcome nonsense. I knocked. Light but firm. Expecting a quick exchange. Password, thanks, done. The door swung open and I froze. She stood there. Eleanor Monroe, maybe late 30s, in a dark green bathrobe that clung to her damp skin. Her hair was wet, sticking to her neck, a few water droplets glistening on her collarbone. She'd clearly just stepped out of the shower, but she wasn't fazed. Not even a hint of embarrassment. Her eyes locked onto mine, steady, unapologetic, like she was sizing me up. I opened my mouth to speak, but she beat me to it. Her voice was low and smooth with an edge I couldn't quite place. "You knocked on the right door," she said, leaning against the frame. "Come on in. You won't want to go back to your place." I stood there, my brain short-circuiting. Was she joking? Flirting? The words hung in the air, half invitation, half challenge. My pulse kicked up, and I clutched my phone tighter, trying to stay grounded. I just need your Wi-Fi password, I managed, my voice sounding thinner than I'd like. My internet's down and I've got work to finish. She tilted her head, a faint smile curling her lips like she knew something I didn't. Sure, she said, stepping back to open the door wider, but come in. It's easier to show you. I hesitated, my instincts screaming to keep this quick. But my feet moved before my brain caught up. I stepped inside, and the door clicked shut behind me. Her apartment was nothing like mine. Warm golden light spilled from lamps, casting soft shadows over bookshelves crammed with novels and old journals. A vintage Nikon camera sat on a side table next to a stack of black and white photos. Desserts, war-torn streets, faces I didn't recognize. The air smelled of coffee and something floral. Low jazz, Miles Davis maybe, came from a small speaker in the corner. It felt like stepping into someone's private world. One that didn't invite just anyone. She gestured to a wooden dining table where a sleek laptop sat open. Use mine, she said, pouring coffee into 2 mugs without asking if I wanted any. The network's more stable than whatever you're dealing with next door. I set my phone down, still processing. Her bathrobe. Her voice. The way she moved like she owned every inch of the space. Thanks, I'm Theo, by the way, I said, sitting awkwardly at the table. From 203. Eleanor Monroe? She replied, handing me a mug. Her fingers brushed mine for half a second, and I swear my skin buzzed. Call me Eleanor. No need for formalities. She sat across from me, one leg crossed over the other, the bathrobe slipping just enough to show a glimpse of her shoulder. I looked away, focusing on the laptop screen. But my heart was racing. This wasn't just about Wi-Fi anymore. I logged in, pulled up my email, and tried to focus on work. But I could feel her watching me, not in a creepy way. Just present. The jazz filled the silence, and I caught myself glancing at the photos on the wall, the camera, the books. You a photographer? I asked, desperate to say something normal. Used to be, she said, her tone clipped but not cold. War journalist. Syria, Iraq, now I just write, edit, keep things quiet. She didn't elaborate, and I didn't push. But the weight of those words settled over the room. I'd heard whispers from the neighbors, how she'd covered conflict zones, how dangerous it had been. But they'd never mentioned if she was married. As I finished my emails, moving slower than usual, I noticed something I'd missed before. On the bookshelf behind her, partially hidden by a stack of books, was a framed wedding photo. Eleanor in a white dress, smiling next to a tall man in military uniform. Recent, maybe 5 years old, max. My stomach dropped. She caught me looking. Her expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. My husband, she said simply. David, he's deployed, Special Forces, Afghanistan currently. Won't be back for another 7 months. 7 months. The words hung between us, loaded with meaning I didn't want to examine too closely. Must be tough, I said, not knowing what else to say. It is, she admitted. 10 years of marriage, and I've spent maybe 3 of them actually living with him. The rest is video calls, missed anniversaries, and learning to be alone in a relationship. There was bitterness in her voice. Not directed at me. Just there, raw and real. Thanks for this, I said, closing the laptop. I'll get my internet sorted soon. Won't bug you again. She leaned back, her smile faint but sharp. It's no trouble, Theo. I don't mind the company. Her eyes held mine a beat too long, and I felt that same pull from when she'd opened the door, like I was standing on the edge of something I couldn't name. Something dangerous. I stood, mumbled another thanks, and headed out. Her words echoed in my head. You won't want to go back to your place. As I closed my apartment door behind me, the silence of my own space felt colder, emptier, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just stepped into something I wasn't ready for, something that was going to change everything. The next morning, I woke up to the silence of my apartment, the kind that feels heavier after you've been somewhere alive. My place was still a mess. Boxes half unpacked, sink full of dishes, and no internet. I checked my phone, hoping the provider had fixed things overnight. No luck. Another day of begging for Wi-Fi. I thought about Eleanor's apartment. The warm light, the jazz. The way she'd looked at me in that bathrobe, and that wedding photo on the shelf. Her husband was in Afghanistan, 7 months away. And she was here, alone, inviting strange neighbors into her space at night. Get a grip, Theo, I muttered, pulling on a hoodie. But I grabbed my laptop anyway. I knocked on her door, lighter this time, half expecting her to ignore me. The door opened, and there she was. No bathrobe today. Just a fitted black sweater and jeans, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. She looked less like a mystery and more like someone who just rolled out of bed with a purpose. Back already, she said, her voice teasing but not unkind. Your internet still on strike? Yeah, I said, holding up my laptop like it was proof. Mind if I borrow your Wi-Fi again? I'll be quick. She stepped aside, gesturing me in. Take your time. I'm not going anywhere. Her apartment was the same as yesterday. Books stacked on every surface, the old Nikon camera catching the morning light, jazz humming softly from the speaker. Air smelled of fresh coffee and something like sandalwood. I sat at her dining table, and she slid a mug across to me without asking. Black, right? She said, raising an eyebrow. I nodded, surprised she'd remembered. Thanks. You didn't have to. I don't do things I have to, she said, sitting on the sofa with a book in her lap. I do things I want to. Her tone was matter-of-fact, but there was that edge again. The one that made my stomach flip. I focused on my screen, answering support tickets, but my attention kept drifting to her. To the way she turned pages without looking up. To the wedding ring on her left hand that caught the light every time she moved. Gold band, simple, worn. 10 years of marriage, she'd said. And her husband was halfway around the world. Do you talk to him? I asked before I could stop myself. Your husband, video calls or whatever. She looked up, her expression unreadable. Once a week if we're lucky. When he's not on a mission, when the connection works. When he remembers, the last word carried weight. Sounds lonely, I said. It is, she admitted. But it's been lonely for a long time. Even when he was here, he wasn't really here. His mind was always somewhere else. Planning the next deployment, training, living for the mission. She closed her book, setting it aside. I used to be like that too. When I was covering war zones, I understood him. We both lived for the adrenaline, the purpose. But I came home. I chose this. Quiet Tacoma, writing, editing, a normal life. He didn't. He couldn't. Do you resent him for it? I asked. She was quiet for a moment, her fingers absently twisting her wedding ring. I resent the loneliness, she said finally. I resent feeling like a ghost in my own marriage, like I'm just waiting. Always waiting for him to come back, to choose me, to choose us. But he never does. The vulnerability in her voice made my chest tight. I'm sorry, I said. Don't be, she replied, her eyes meeting mine. I made my choices too. I chose to stay married, to keep waiting. To keep pretending that 10 years of loneliness is somehow better than starting over. The air between us felt charged. Heavy with things unsaid. Why do you let me keep coming back? I asked. For the Wi-Fi, the coffee, all of it, you don't even know me. She smiled, sad and knowing at once. Because you're here, she said simply. Because for a few hours, I don't feel like a ghost. I feel like a person, like someone who exists beyond just waiting for a phone call that might not come. My heart was pounding. I should have left, should have thanked her and walked out. Should have kept this professional, distant, safe, but I didn't. I'll keep coming back then, I said, if you want me to. I do, she whispered. And just like that, the line blurred a little more. Over the next 2 weeks, I became a regular fixture in Eleanor's apartment. My internet got fixed on day 3. But I didn't stop knocking on her door. We fell into a routine. I'd show up in the morning with my laptop, and she'd already have coffee waiting. We'd work in comfortable silence, me handling support tickets, her editing manuscripts for the publishing house she freelanced for. Sometimes we'd talk. About books, about her journalism days, about my failed relationship with Sarah. She'd tell me stories about Syria and Iraq, not the horrific parts, but the human moments. The translator who loved terrible American pop music. The children who draw pictures in the dust. The small acts of kindness in impossible places. I'd tell her about growing up in Oregon, about my parents' messy divorce. About feeling like I was drifting through life without a plan. You're not drifting, she said one afternoon. You're just not ready to anchor yourself yet. That's different. Is that what you did? I asked. Anchor yourself with marriage? She laughed, bitter and sad. I thought I did. Turns out I just tied myself to someone who's never in port. The more time I spent with her, the more I saw the cracks in her carefully constructed world. The loneliness she tried to hide. The way she'd check her phone hopefully, then set it down disappointed when there was no message from David. And the more I saw those cracks, the more I wanted to fill them, which was dangerous. Because she was married. Even if her husband was an ocean away. Even if their marriage was more fiction than reality, she was still married. But boundaries kept blurring. It started small. Her hand on my shoulder when she'd lean over to look at something on my screen. Sitting closer on the couch during our afternoon coffee breaks. The way our knees would touch under the table and neither of us would move away. Then came the night of the blackout. A transformer blew around 8 p.m., plunging the entire block into darkness. I was in my apartment when it happened, fumbling for my phone's flashlight. My first thought was Eleanor. I grabbed the flashlight and knocked on her door. It opened almost immediately. She stood there in the kitchen doorway, a few candles flickering on the counter behind her. She wore a loose gray sweater and black leggings, her hair down and slightly messy. The candlelight softened her features, casting shadows that made her look both vulnerable and untouchable. "Theo," she said, her voice steady but warm. "Checking to see if I'm still alive?" "Something like that," I said, holding up the flashlight. "You okay? This blackout's got the whole block." She shrugged, stepping aside to let me in. "I've been through worse. Come in, it's warmer here." I followed her into the kitchen where she'd set up a small cluster of candles, their flames dancing in the draft. The air smelled of wax and coffee and that faint sandalwood note that seemed to follow her everywhere. A portable speaker played soft jazz, running on batteries. The notes were low and mournful. She gestured to the floor where a couple of cushions were tossed against the cabinets. "No power, no chairs. Sit." I hesitated, then sank down, leaning against the cabinet next to her. The floor was cold, but the candles and her presence made the space feel alive. "You don't seem fazed," I said, watching her pour water from a pitcher. "Most people would be freaking out right now." She handed me the glass, her fingers brushing mine for a split second, sending a jolt through me. "I've lived through darker nights than this," she said quietly. "Syria, Iraq, places where the dark wasn't just a power outage, you learned to make do." She didn't elaborate, but I could feel the weight of it. The war zones she'd seen. The dangers she'd faced. The life she'd left behind. "Guess Tacoma's a cakewalk compared to that," I said. She smiled. Just a flicker, and pulled the speaker closer, turning up the jazz a notch. "This song," she said, closing her eyes for a moment. "It was our song. Mine and David's. We'd listen to it when things got quiet, when the world felt too heavy." She opened her eyes, catching mine. "What about you, Theo? What do you listen to when the world's too much?" I leaned back, the cabinet cool against my spine. Used to be punk rock, back when I thought I was angry at everything. Now, I don't know. Maybe nothing. Just silence. I paused, surprised at my own honesty. After Sarah left, I kind of stopped listening to anything that felt too real. She nodded like she understood more than I'd said. "Silence can be safe," she said. "But it's lonely." The words hung there, and for a moment, neither of us moved. The candles flickered, throwing light across her face, and I saw it again, that unguarded look. The one she'd given me that first day, then she did something I didn't expect. She reached out, her hand finding mine. Not grabbing, just resting there. Warm and steady. "Sit closer," she said, her voice barely above the music. I shifted, my shoulder brushing hers, and she didn't pull away. We sat like that on the kitchen floor. The world outside swallowed by darkness. The jazz wove around us, and I could feel her breathing, slow and even, next to me. "Tell me something," I said, my voice low, almost afraid to break the moment. "Why do you still wear it?" She didn't need to ask what I meant. Her thumb moved to the wedding ring, twisting it slowly. "Because taking it off feels like admitting defeat," she said. "Like admitting that 10 years meant nothing. That I wasted a decade of my life waiting for someone who was never going to show up." She looked at me, her eyes catching the candlelight. "But lately I've been wondering if keeping it on is the real defeat. If I'm just clinging to something that died a long time ago." "Eleanor," I started. "I saw you that first day," she interrupted softly. "Standing there, awkward, holding your phone like it was a lifeline, and I liked you right then. I thought I'd learned to not need anyone anymore, Theo. But you make me question that." My heart was pounding so loud I was sure she could hear it. "I thought I was just here for the Wi-Fi," I said, trying to lighten it, but my voice cracked. "I don't know what I'm doing here." She didn't laugh, didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned closer, her head resting lightly on my shoulder, her hair brushing my cheek. "Neither do I," she whispered. "But I don't want you to leave." We stayed like that, the candles burning lower, the jazz looping softly, the world outside forgotten. No kiss, no grand gesture. Just her head on my shoulder, our hands still linked, and a quiet admission that something had changed. Something we couldn't take back. The darkness around us felt less empty. Like it was holding us together instead of pulling us apart. And I knew, sitting there with a married woman in the candlelight, that I was in way over my head. That I was falling for someone I couldn't have. That I was becoming the other man, and I didn't want to stop. Before we continue with what happens next, I need to pause and ask you something. Are you Team Theo and Eleanor or Team David? Is this a tragic love story about two lonely people finding each other? Or is this a betrayal of the worst kind, sleeping with a soldier's wife while he's deployed? Drop a comment right now and tell me what you think. I read every single comment, and I want to know where you stand on this. And if you're hooked on this story and want to see how it ends, smash that like button. It takes 1 second and it helps this channel reach more people with true stories like this. Alright, let's get back to the story, because Theo and Eleanor are about to cross the final line. The one they can never come back from. The power came back on just before dawn. The sudden hum of the fridge and flicker of lights pulled me out of a half-sleep. I was still on Eleanor's kitchen floor, my back stiff against the cabinet. She'd moved to the couch sometime in the night, a blanket draped over her, the candles burned down to stubs. The jazz had stopped, leaving only the faint patter of rain outside. I stood stretching, my neck ached. The memory of her words, "I liked you right then," sat heavy in my chest like a secret I wasn't sure I was allowed to keep. Eleanor stirred, blinking awake as morning light filtered through the window. "Morning," she said, her voice soft but steady, like last night hadn't changed everything. She sat up, smoothing her sweater, her hair a little messy but still framing her face in that effortless way. "Coffee?" she asked. "Yeah, sure," I said, my voice rough from lack of sleep. I wanted to say something about the night before. Her hand in mine, her head on my shoulder, but the words wouldn't come. She moved to the counter, filling the kettle like it was any other morning, and I followed her lead, keeping things normal. We didn't talk about it. Didn't mention the moment when the line between us had blurred beyond recognition. It was like an unspoken agreement. What happened in the dark stayed there, but everything had changed. We both knew it. We drank coffee at the table, my laptop open but untouched. The air felt different, lighter but charged, like we were both aware of something new but too cautious to name it. "Thanks for letting me crash last night," I said, breaking the silence. "Didn't expect to camp out on your floor?" She smiled, her eyes catching mine for a moment. "You brought a flashlight." "That's more than most would do." Her tone was light, but there was warmth behind it. A flicker of the vulnerability she'd shown in the candlelight. I nodded, not trusting myself to say more. I headed back to my apartment soon after, the hallway cold and quiet compared to hers. My place was still a mess. Boxes, dirty dishes, no personality. As I set my laptop down, I noticed something hanging on my door handle. A small brown paper bag tied with a piece of string. I frowned, opening it. Inside was a portable Wi-Fi hotspot, sleek and new, and a folded note in neat slanted handwriting. "When you really want internet, knock 3 times. If you want me, knock twice." My breath caught. I read it again, the words sinking in, her voice echoing in my head. I looked at the hotspot, then back at the note, a smile tugging at my lips. Eleanor. She hadn't said a word about this in the kitchen. Hadn't hinted at it. But this was her. Bold and subtle all at once, leaving the next move to me. I stood there, the paper in my hand, the rain still tapping outside. My apartment felt emptier than ever. And I knew, without a doubt, that I'd be knocking on her door again, not for Wi-Fi. Not anymore. I waited until evening, let the anticipation build. Let myself think about what this meant, what I was about to do. She was married. Her husband was deployed, risking his life overseas. And here I was, about to cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed. But I'd been crossing lines for weeks now. Small ones. Subtle ones. This was just making it official. I walked to her door, raised my hand, and knocked twice. The door opened almost immediately, like she'd been waiting. Eleanor stood there in a simple black dress, her hair down, a glass of wine in her hand. The apartment behind her was dimly lit, candles again, jazz playing softly. She didn't say anything, just stepped aside, her eyes holding mine with an intensity that made my heart race. I walked in, and the door closed behind me with a soft click. "I got your note," I said, my voice rougher than I intended. I know, she replied, setting her wine glass down. You knocked twice. She moved closer, close enough that I could smell her perfume, see the way her pulse beat at her throat. Last chance to walk away, Theo, she said softly. Once this happens, we can't undo it. I'm married, this is wrong, and we both know it. I know, I said, and I did. I knew exactly how wrong this was. How much damage it could cause. How I was about to become the thing I'd always despised, the guy who sleeps with someone else's wife. But I also knew that I'd never felt this alive. This scene, this connected to another person. I don't want to walk away, I said. Something shifted in her expression, relief, maybe, or surrender. She reached up, her hand cupping my cheek, her thumb brushing my jaw. Neither do I, she whispered. And then she kissed me. It was soft, at first, tentative, like she was giving me one more chance to stop this. But I didn't. I couldn't. I kissed her back, my hands finding her waist, pulling her closer. She made a small sound in the back of her throat, and it undid something in me. The kiss deepened, became more urgent, more desperate. Her hands were in my hair. Mine were sliding up her back. We were pressed together, breathing hard, crossing that final line we'd been dancing around for weeks. Bedroom, she gasped against my mouth. We barely made it. Kissing in the hallway, stumbling through the door, pulling it close. Her dress on the floor, my shirt gone. The wedding ring on her finger catching the light as she unbuttoned my jeans. And then we were in her bed, the bed she shared with a husband who was an ocean away, and nothing else mattered. Not the guilt, not the consequences. Not the fact that this was the worst decision either of us could make. Just us, her body against mine. Her gasping my name. The way she held on to me like I was the only real thing in her world. Afterward, we lay tangled together. Both of us breathing hard, the weight of what we'd done settling over us. We can't take this back, she said quietly, her head on my chest, her fingers tracing patterns on my skin. I know, I said. I'm still married. I know. This makes me a terrible person. It makes us both terrible, I corrected. She lifted her head to look at me, her eyes searching mine. I should feel guilty, she said. I should hate myself. But all I feel is relief. Like I've been holding my breath for 10 years and I can finally exhale. I tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. What happens now? I asked. I don't know, she admitted. David comes home in 6 months. I'll have to tell him. Ask for a divorce. It's going to be messy and complicated and probably destroy me financially. You don't have to tell him about me, I said. You could just say you want out, she shook her head. I won't lie to him. Whatever else I've become, I won't be a liar. He deserves to know the truth. That you're having an affair with your 25-year-old neighbor? I said, trying to lighten the mood. She smiled sadly. That I've been unhappy for years, and I finally found someone who makes me feel alive again. Even if the timing is terrible, even if it's wrong. She kissed me again, soft and lingering. Stay tonight? She asked. Yeah, I said. I'll stay. So I did. And that night became the first of many. We had 6 months before David came home. 6 months before reality would crash down on us. We made the most of them. I'd sleep at her place most nights, sneaking back to my apartment before dawn so the neighbors wouldn't notice. We'd spend our days working, her editing, me handling support tickets, but the afternoons and evenings were ours. We'd cook together in her small kitchen, laughing when I'd burn something, or she'd add too much spice. We'd watch old movies on her couch, her head on my shoulder, my fingers running through her hair. We'd talk for hours about everything and nothing. She'd tell me about the places she'd been, the stories she'd covered. I'd tell her about my dreams, vague and half-formed as they were. You should go back to school, she said one night. Finish your degree. You're too smart to be stuck in IT support forever. Says the war correspondent who became a freelance editor, I teased. Exactly, she replied. I know what it's like to settle. Don't do what I did. Don't let fear keep you small. And we'd make love. Constantly. Desperately. Like we were trying to fit a lifetime into 6 months. Sometimes in the quiet moments after she'd cry. Not dramatically. Just silent tears that she'd wipe away quickly, hoping I wouldn't notice. But I always noticed. I'm sorry, she'd say. It's not you, it's just guilt. And grief. I'm mourning my marriage even though it died years ago. You don't have to apologize, I'd tell her, holding her close. But the guilt was always there, for both of us. I'd lie awake some nights, staring at the ceiling, thinking about David, a man I'd never met. A special forces soldier risking his life overseas while I slept with his wife. Was he a good guy? Did he love Eleanor in his own way? Was he aware of how lonely she'd been? Did any of that matter? I was sleeping with his wife. I was the villain in this story, no matter how I tried to justify it. Eleanor struggled with it too. She'd call David every week, Sunday nights, like clockwork, and I'd go back to my apartment to give them privacy. I'd sit in my empty place, imagining their conversation. Did she lie about her week? Did she pretend to be the faithful wife, waiting patiently for his return? Or did she tell him bits of the truth, that she was lonely, that she'd made a friend, that she was questioning their marriage? I never asked. That was her space, her relationship. I was just the other man, the affair, the secret. But as the weeks turned into months, something shifted. We stopped talking about David, stopped mentioning the deadline looming over us. We built this bubble, this temporary world where it was just us. Where she wasn't married and I wasn't the other man. Where we could pretend this was normal, sustainable, real. But bubbles always pop. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon in late November. I was at Eleanor's place, working on my laptop, when her phone rang. She glanced at the screen and went pale. "It's David," she said, her voice tight. I started to stand, to give her privacy, but she held up a hand. "Stay," she said, "please." She answered, putting it on speaker. "Hey, babe." David's voice came through deep, tired, with that military clip. "Got some news. What's going on?" Eleanor asked, her hand finding mine under the table, squeezing tight. "Deployment's getting cut short. Security situation changed. They're rotating us home early." My stomach dropped. "How early?" Eleanor asked, her voice carefully neutral. 3 weeks. I'll be stateside by December 15th. Home by the 18th, just in time for Christmas. 3 weeks. Not 6 months. 3 weeks. That's great, Eleanor managed. "I can't wait to see you." She was a good liar. I'd give her that. They talked for a few more minutes, logistics, travel details, him asking about her work. She answered on autopilot, her eyes locked on mine, panic written across her face. When she hung up, we just sat there in silence. 3 weeks, she whispered. "I heard," I said. "I'm not ready," she said, tears starting to fall. I thought I'd have 6 months to figure this out, to prepare, to find the courage to end things. But 3 weeks, Theo? I can't. I pulled her into my arms, holding her while she cried. "We'll figure it out," I said, even though I had no idea how. "I have to tell him," she said into my chest, "as soon as he gets home. Before we pretend everything's normal. I can't do that to him. I can't sleep with both of you." "I know," I said. "But what if he hates me?" she asked, pulling back to look at me. "What if he fights the divorce? What if this destroys him?" "Then it destroys him," I said gently. "But Eleanor, you can't stay married to someone out of guilt. That's not fair to anyone, not to him, not to you, and not to me." She nodded, wiping her eyes. 3 weeks, she repeated. We spent those 3 weeks like people living on borrowed time. Every moment felt precious and terrifying. We knew it was ending, that this bubble we built was about to burst this spectacularly. Eleanor started preparing. She contacted a divorce lawyer, started organizing her finances, began the process of separating her life from David's. And I waited, because what else could I do? I was the affair, the secret, the reason her marriage would end. All I could do was wait for David to come home, and hope that we'd survive what came next. David Monroe came home on December 18th at 3 p.m. I was in my apartment when I heard him in the hallway, boots on the floor, the sound of a duffel bag dropping, Eleanor's voice saying his name with surprise and something like dread. Their door closed, and I sat on my couch, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. He was home, the husband, the soldier, the man whose life I was about to destroy. I didn't hear from Eleanor that day, or that night, or the next morning. I told myself to give them space, that she needed time. That confronting her husband about an affair wasn't something you rushed. But by the second day, I was going insane. On December 20th, there was a knock on my door. I opened it, expecting Eleanor. Instead, David Monroe stood in my doorway. He was exactly what I'd imagined, tall, military fit, with that bearing that screamed special forces. Short dark hair, sharp eyes, the kind of face that had seen things most people couldn't comprehend. He wore civilian clothes, jeans and a flannel, but he still looked like a soldier. "You must be Theo," he said, his voice level. Not friendly but not hostile either. "The neighbor." My mouth went dry. "Yeah, that's me. I'm David, Eleanor's husband." He extended his hand. I shook it, feeling like the world's biggest asshole. "Eleanor's told me a lot about you," he continued. "Said you helped her out when her internet was down. Kept her company while I was gone. I wanted to thank you for that." Oh God, she hadn't told him yet. "It was nothing," I managed. She's great." "She is," David agreed. His eyes were searching mine, looking for something. "We're having some people over for dinner tomorrow night, just a few friends. Eleanor insisted I invite you. To properly thank you. This was a nightmare." "I don't want to intrude on your homecoming," I said. "You wouldn't be intruding," David said. "Eleanor would be upset if you didn't come. Besides, I'd like to get to know the guy who kept my wife sane while I was deployed. The guy who slept with your wife," I thought. "Sure," I heard myself say. "What time?" 6. "Bring wine if you want, but don't feel obligated." He clapped me on the shoulder, friendly, casual, and walked back to his apartment. I closed the door and immediately texted Eleanor. "What the hell? Why didn't you tell him?" She responded 5 minutes later. "I tried. He's been so happy to be home. So affectionate." I couldn't find the words. "Tomorrow. I'll tell him tomorrow after everyone leaves." I didn't respond. What was there to say? The dinner party was torture. There were 8 of us, me, Eleanor, David, and 5 of his military buddies with their wives or girlfriends. Eleanor had outdone herself. The apartment looked beautiful, candles, decorations, a full spread of food that must have taken her all day. She looked beautiful too. Dark green dress, hair down, makeup perfect. She looked like David's wife. The perfect military spouse. She barely looked at me all night. I sat at the end of the table, making small talk with a Marine named Jake and his wife Sarah, ironically, the same name as my ex. David was at the head of the table, holding court, telling stories about deployment, making everyone laugh. He was charismatic, confident, clearly a leader, and he was completely in love with his wife. I could see it in the way he looked at her, the way he'd touch her arm when making a point, the way he'd smile at her from across the table. 10 years of marriage and he still looked at her like she was everything. It made me want to vomit. "So Theo," David said during dessert, turning his attention to me. "Eleanor says you work in IT? Remote support?" "Yeah," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Nothing glamorous. But flexible, right? You can work from anywhere?" "Pretty much." "That's great," David said. "Eleanor needs that kind of flexibility in her life. Someone who's actually around. Unlike me, deployed half the year." He laughed, but there was something sad in it. "I keep telling her she should have more friends," he continued. "Get out more. She's too isolated." "So I'm glad you've been there for her?" Eleanor's hand tightened around her wine glass. "David," she started, but he kept going. "No, seriously, it means a lot. I worry about her when I'm gone. Knowing she has a friend next door makes it easier." "A friend," that's what she told him, that we were friends. I caught Eleanor's eye across the table. She looked miserable, trapped, like she wanted to say something but couldn't. Not here, not in front of everyone. The dinner finally ended around 11. As people were leaving, David pulled me aside. "Hey, I meant what I said. Thank you for looking out for Eleanor. She doesn't make friends easily. The fact that she opened up to you, that means something." I wanted to tell him the truth right then. Wanted to say, "I'm not her friend. I'm the guy who's been sleeping with her for 3 months. I'm the guy who's in love with your wife." But I didn't, because that wasn't my confession to make. "She's easy to talk to," I said instead. "She is," David agreed. "I'm lucky to have her, even if I don't deserve her." The self-awareness in that statement hit me like a truck. He knew, on some level he knew that his marriage was broken. That leaving Eleanor alone for months at a time was destroying them. But knowing and doing something about it were 2 different things. I went back to my apartment and waited. Around 1 a.m. my phone buzzed. "He's asleep. Can you come over?" I should have said no, should have told her to handle this on her own. But I grabbed my keys and knocked on her door softly twice. She opened it immediately, pulling me inside. Her makeup was smudged from crying, the dress replaced with sweatpants and a t-shirt. "I tried to tell him," she said, her voice breaking, "after everyone left." I sat him down and I said, David, we need to talk about our marriage. And you know what he said? I shook my head. He said, I know, and I'm sorry. I've been a terrible husband. Being deployed made me realize how much I've taken you for granted. But I'm going to change. I'm putting in for a transfer, stateside assignment, no more deployments. I want to be here, Eleanor. I want to fix us. She was crying now, full-on sobbing. He wants to fix us, Theo. After 10 years of being absent, he finally wants to try. And I have to tell him it's too late. That I've been having an affair. That I want a divorce. I pulled her into my arms, holding her while she cried, When are you going to tell him? I asked, Tomorrow, she said. I can't keep lying. I can't sleep in the same bed with him knowing what I've done. Tomorrow morning I'll tell him everything. About me? She pulled back, looking at me with red, swollen eyes. Yes, about you, about us, all of it. He deserves the truth. He's going to hate me, I said. He's going to hate both of us, she corrected. But we did this, Theo. We made these choices. Now we deal with the consequences. I kissed her forehead. I'll be next door. If you need me, I'll need you, she whispered. After this, I'm going to need you more than ever. I left her apartment at 2 a.m., went back to mine, and didn't sleep. Because tomorrow, everything was going to explode. And I was the one holding the grenade. Okay, we're about to get to the most intense part of this story, the confrontation. The moment David finds out the truth, the explosion. But before we get there, I need to know, what would you do if you were David? Would you fight for your marriage? Walk away? Confront the other man? Hit that like button right now if you think David deserves to hear the truth face to face. And drop a comment telling me how you would react in his position. Because what happens next, it's brutal, it's raw, and it's real. Let's go. I heard them fighting at 9 a.m. The walls were thin enough that I could hear David's voice, loud, angry, disbelieving. How long? He shouted. How long have you been fucking him? Eleanor's response was quieter, but I could make out some words. 3 months. I'm sorry. It just happened. It just happened? Jesus Christ, Eleanor. While I was deployed? While I was overseas? You're never here. Eleanor's voice rose. 10 years, David. 10 years of being alone, of being married to a ghost. So you fuck the neighbor? That's your solution? Something crashed, glass breaking. I was on my feet, ready to intervene if things got physical. But I waited, ear pressed to the wall. I want a divorce, Eleanor said clearly. I've already talked to a lawyer. I'm filing next week. Because of him? Because of some 25-year-old kid who has no idea what he's doing with his life? Because I'm unhappy, Eleanor shouted. Because I've been unhappy for years, and I finally found someone who sees me, someone who wants to be with me. I want to be with you. I just told you I'm transferring stateside. It's too late, David. I'm sorry, but it's too late. There was a long silence. Then David's voice, cold and measured. I want to meet him, the neighbor. I want to look him in the eye and hear him tell me that he thinks fucking my wife while I was deployed was the right thing to do. My stomach dropped. David, don't. Call him, now, or I will. 5 minutes later, there was a knock on my door. I opened it. Eleanor stood there, her face blotchy with tears, David behind her with his arms crossed. He wants to talk to you, Eleanor said quietly. This was it, the confrontation I'd been dreading. I stepped into the hallway, closing my door behind me. The three of us stood there, Eleanor between us, like she was trying to keep us from killing each other. David looked at me with barely controlled rage. You're the guy, he said. The one she's been sleeping with. Yeah, I said, forcing myself to meet his eyes. I am. While I was deployed, while I was in Afghanistan. Yes. Did you know she was married? I could have lied. Could have said I didn't know that Eleanor had hidden it, but that would be cowardly. Yes, I said. I knew from the first day. David's jaw clenched. And you did it anyway? Yes. Why? He asked, his voice breaking slightly. Why would you do that to someone? You don't even know me. I fell in love with her, I said simply. I know that doesn't make it right. I know I'm the asshole here. But I fell in love with your wife, and I'm not going to apologize for that. You should apologize for the timing, David shot back. For being a homewrecker. For taking advantage of a lonely woman. I didn't take advantage of anyone, I said, anger flaring. Eleanor made her own choices. She's right here, Eleanor interjected. And yes, I made my own choices. This isn't on Theo, David. This is on me. On us. On 10 years of a broken marriage that we both refused to acknowledge. David turned to her, his expression crumbling. I love you, he said, and I could hear the desperation. I know I've been absent. I know I haven't been the husband you deserved, but I love you, Eleanor. Doesn't that count for something? It does, Eleanor said, tears streaming down her face. But it's not enough anymore. I'm sorry, David. I'm so sorry. But I can't do this anymore. David looked between us, his wife and the man she'd chosen over him. His hands clenched into fists, and for a moment I thought he might hit me. Instead, he just shook his head. I need to get out of here, he said. I can't look at either of you right now. He went back into the apartment, and we heard him grabbing things, keys, wallet, his jacket. He came back out with a duffel bag. I'm staying at Jake's, he told Eleanor. My lawyer will contact yours about the divorce. I want my stuff out of the apartment by New Year's. David. Don't, he said, holding up a hand. Just don't. He looked at me one more time. I hope you know what you're getting into, he said. Because relationships built on affairs? They don't usually last. And when this falls apart, and it will, you'll realize you destroyed my marriage for nothing. Then he was gone. Walking down the hallway, disappearing down the stairs. Eleanor collapsed against her doorframe, sobbing. I pulled her into my arms, holding her while she fell apart. It's over, she gasped. It's really over. I know, I said, stroking her hair. I know. We stood there in the hallway. Two people who'd chosen each other at the cost of everything else, and I wondered if David was right. If we destroyed his marriage for something that wouldn't last. But looking at Eleanor, broken and vulnerable and real, I knew I'd make the same choice again. Even if it made me the villain. Even if it destroyed everything, because I loved her, and sometimes love is selfish. Sometimes love is wrong. But it's still love. It's been 6 months since David came home. 6 months since everything exploded. The divorce was finalized in March. David didn't contest it, just wanted it over. Eleanor kept the apartment. I helped her box up his things, and we shipped them to his new place in Virginia where he'd taken that stateside assignment. The neighbors whispered, of course. About the affair. About me. About how I destroyed a military marriage. Some of them stopped talking to us. One woman, Mrs. Chun from 206, actually spit at Eleanor in the hallway and called her a whore. It was ugly. Painful, everything we'd expected and worse. But we survived it. Eleanor threw herself into her writing, finishing a memoir about her years as a war correspondent. It got picked up by a major publisher. She's doing interviews now, talking about trauma and resilience and starting over. I went back to school, community college, working on my IT degree. Eleanor was right. I was too smart to be stuck in support forever. We're figuring it out. What it means to be together without the thrill of secrecy. Without the stolen moments and forbidden touches. It's harder than I expected. Relationships built in the dark don't always survive the light. We fight sometimes. About stupid things. About big things. About whether we'd have fallen for each other if she hadn't been married. If there hadn't been that element of the forbiddance. Would you have wanted me if I'd just been a single woman? She asked me last week. Or was it the affair that made it exciting? I don't know, I admitted. But I know I want you now. Here, in the daylight. When you're pissed at me for leaving dishes in the sink. When you're stressed about deadlines. When there's nothing forbidden or exciting about us, I still want you. She'd kiss me then, soft and real. Good, she'd said. Because you're stuck with me now. I moved into her apartment, our apartment, last month. We combined our books on the shelves. My laptop next to hers on the table. My shoes by the door next to her boots. It's not perfect. We're both damaged in our own ways. Carrying guilt and scars from what we did. Sometimes I think about David, wonder if he's okay. If he found someone new. If he hates me still, or if he's moved on. Eleanor keeps a photo of him, the wedding photo, in a box in the closet. Not on display, but not thrown away either. He was part of my life, she told me when I found it. I can't pretend those 10 years didn't happen. I understand, you can't build a future by erasing the past. So here we are. The affair that became a relationship. The forbidden love that became everyday life. Eleanor's standing in the kitchen making coffee, my coffee, black, just how I like it. The jazz is playing softly from the speaker. And I'm sitting at our table, writing this story. The truth of how we got here, the messy, complicated, imperfect truth. We destroyed a marriage to be together. We hurt people. made selfish choices, crossed lines we shouldn't have crossed. But we're here, and we're real, and maybe that's enough. Maybe love doesn't have to be perfect to be worth it. Maybe being the other man doesn't have to define me forever. Maybe we can build something good from something that started wrong. Eleanor hands me my coffee, kisses the top of my head. You almost done? She asks. I'm thinking we could take a walk. It finally stopped raining. I close my laptop, take her hand. Yeah, I say, I'm done. And we walk out into the Tacoma sunshine, two people who chose each other despite everything. Two people trying to prove that love, even when it starts in the dark, can survive in the light. So, what do you think? Was Theo wrong for sleeping with a married woman whose husband was deployed? Absolutely. Was Eleanor wrong for having an affair instead of ending her marriage first? Without a doubt. But does that mean their love isn't real? Does that mean they don't deserve happiness? I'll let you decide. I want to hear your thoughts on this story. Drop a comment and tell me. Number 1. Are Theo and Eleanor villains or victims? Number 2. Did David deserve what happened, or was he betrayed in the worst way? Number 3. Do you think their relationship will last, or will it fall apart like David predicted? And number 4. Have you ever been in a situation like this, as the affair, the betrayed spouse, or the lonely partner? Your comments make this community what it is. Share your story, your opinion, your experience. I read every single comment. If this story hit you hard, you need to watch these next. My wife's best friend confessed she's in love with me, a friendship that crossed every boundary. I caught my husband with his secretary on our anniversary, the ultimate betrayal. The coworker who destroyed my marriage, an office affair that ruined 3 lives. Check the links in the description or click the videos popping up on your screen right now. If you made it this far, you're clearly hooked on true relationship drama stories. Hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story. We post 3 times a week, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And smash that like button if you want more stories like this. It literally takes 1 second, and it helps us grow this channel and bring you more incredible true confessions. Thank you for watching this Ryan's Revelations exclusive. This was a true story about forbidden love, marriage betrayal, and 2 people who destroyed everything to be together. Remember, real love is messy. Real relationships are complicated. And sometimes there are no heroes, just people making impossible choices. Until next time, this is Ryan's Revelations, bringing you the truth about love, betrayal, and everything in between. Stay real, stay honest, and keep those stories coming.